Good morning again, everyone, or good afternoon if you're joining us from Europe, or good evening if you're joining us from further reaches. Welcome to today's webinar. We have a very interesting topic today from a customer. We're going to have a customer talk about their journey with Jira and how they overcame some of the challenges they faced with Jira. The title of the presentation is When You Can't See the Forest for the Trees. That will be clear if it isn't already to you. What we mean by that in just a few moments. And I'll introduce our guest speaker in just a moment. So quick review of today's agenda. It's a very simple one. We'll do introductions. We'll have our guest presenter, and then we'll do a Q&A session at the end. So we mute microphones for this sort of thing to cut down on the background noise. In fact, Kelly, you can advance to the next slide. So I'd ask you to use the Q&A feature that's built into our webinar platform. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. As we're going through the presentation today, jot down your questions as we go. Jot them down in that Q&A panel. We'll queue them up and we'll ask those questions of our guests today at the end of the session. If there are any questions for ALM Works, of course, I'll be happy to take those questions. As I mentioned, your microphones are muted to cut down on the background noise. And FYI, everyone, this is being recorded. So if you want to go back and review any of the material that was covered today, you'll be able to do it. If you want to share it with a colleague, etc. Typically takes about 24 hours, one business day, before we get the presentation posted on our YouTube channel. And everyone who's attending today's webinar will get an email letting them know where they can find that presentation. So my name is Dave Roseland. I'm with ALM Works. We're the host of today's webinar, but I'm going to be largely silent today after this introduction. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Ari. And Kelly is with BlueCat Networks. He's our guest presenter today. Kelly is an engineering operations manager at BlueCat Networks. It's a 500-person company. If you're not familiar with them, they're in the networking space. They're based in Toronto. Kel has a lot of experience in software development and program management, and in particular with Jira. And BlueCat has been using Jira since 2004. When Kel joined the company in 2012, he helped them grow their usage of Jira and become more effective with Jira, and he's going to talk about that today. Also joining us today is Miles Faulkner. Miles is the CEO of Blended Perspectives. Blended Perspectives is an Atlassian solution partner, and they've been one since 2007. And even though Miles is a co-CEO and manager today, he's maintained his Atlassian expert status and advises clients like BlueCat Networks on their Jira journey. He'll be helping us out with the Q&A today. He works with BlueCat and many other organizations across North America, and he'll take some of the questions today or add his view on some of those questions today when we get to the Q&A session. So I've already introduced Kel. Without further ado, we're going to turn it over to the star of the show today and let him walk you through his journey.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to talk about when you can't see the forest for the trees. And as Dave said, a couple of words about BlueCat. We deliver enterprise networking solutions, including DNS, DHCP, and IP address management, network automation, network security. And as a point of reference, our dev team in Toronto is around 130 people now. So does this screenshot look familiar? You know, lots of issues, little to no organization, kind of hard to tell if you're coming or going. When you're starting out with one or two development teams, you can keep track of a small number of active epics. But when you have 15 or 20 teams working on out-of-the-box Jira, the number of epics rapidly gets out of hand. Your program managers are thinking in terms of releases. Your product managers are thinking in terms of features, goals, you know, or themes and initiatives. Pretty soon your eyes glaze over and you can't see the forest for the trees anymore. So what do you do? Well, you're going to need an issue hierarchy. So what are we trying to do here? Well, we want to be able to group epics together into a sort of a larger entity that we call goals. Obviously, depending on your organization, you might want to call it something else. We want to group goals together into features, and we want to group features together into releases. And this will allow people to zoom in from the release level to see the details at the story level, and zoom out from the story level to see the big picture at the release/feature level. Unfortunately, you can't do that in Jira. Well, where do you go when Jira can't solve your problem? Answer: Atlassian Marketplace. We look at a bunch of apps in the marketplace. This would have been in the 2014, 2015 timeframe. From our investigations at the time, structure was the standout, and we did a trial and eventually bought it. So what is structure? Well, it's a Jira application from ALM Works, which supports very flexible issue hierarchies. And we use it to rapidly build trees of issues. And like I said, this gives us the ability to zoom in and out. Program managers can see what they want and drill down. Developers can see the trees and can zoom out to see what forest they're in. So I'll walk you through structure in 5 easy steps. Setting up Jira, creating the structure, inserting root level issues, extending the structure, and transforming the structure. Setting up Jira. Well, building an issue hierarchy in Jira, out of the box, you get epics, stories, and subtasks. And in order to be able to build our tree, we want to add some stuff on top of that. So releases, features, and goals. To do that, we've added a contains belongs to issue link type. So here's a screenshot from a goal, which belongs to a feature and which contains a couple of epics. This is where we added the issue link type in administration issues, issue linking. You'll notice that our outward description and inward description, we want to get those in the right order so that it reads properly here. It's nice to have the single belongs to link at the top of the list and have the many contains links underneath. All right, let's create the structure. I'll walk through the example here. We've created some issues in our Jira Sandbox project, some links between them, some contains belongs to links, and some epic links. Here we go. So you start from the structure pull down in your top menu there, and towards the bottom you see create structure. So we're going to create structure. We're going to start with an empty structure. You could do it different ways. So we'll give it a name and provide a description and who we're going to share it with. Boom, here is the empty structure in its pristine beauty. Next thing we want to do, obviously, is add some content. So how do we insert issues? Well, click on the automation button at the top center and click on the plus beside it and choose insert. We're going to insert using a JQL query. There's a couple of options there. We're going to do a really simple JQL query. Project equals JSB and type equals release. And here we are. So we've got our 3 releases on the go, and now they're visible in the structure. Next thing, let's extend the structure. So again, we go back to automation plus and down to the extend choice in the pull down menu. And we have a couple of choices under extend. We can extend by linked issues or by stories under epics or by subtasks. So right now we'll start with linked issues. And as we said, we'll choose the contains belong to link type, and the link direction is the parent issue contains a sub issue. I've also ticked the allow changes via structure, which is super handy because what this allows you to do is if you want to change the structure, you can drag and drop within the structure UI, and it will edit the links for you in real time. So that's super handy, way easier than fiddling around with the issue link dialog. So as you can see now, we have some twisties beside our releases. That shows us that there's content underneath the releases. Let's go up to the top for a second and look at the expand collapse dialog. So here's this first button is an expand everything button. The next one is collapse everything. And the third one allows you to choose which level of the structure you want to see. So let's look at that. Right now we're looking at level 2 of the structure, which shows us the releases. So let's expand to level 3. So now we can see the releases and we can see the features under the releases. And we also see that there are again twisties beside the features, which tells us that those same contains belongs to links have pulled in some goals and some stories, some epics, getting ahead of myself, some epics. Now we're going to extend further and pull in the stories. So we'll go back to the automation plus extend and choose stories under epics this time. And now we see some stories under the epics, a couple of spikes, a tech debt issue, and so on. So now it's time for a mini retrospective in the agile world that we live. What did we just do? Well, we just built a dynamic 5-level issue hierarchy with 4 simple lines. It actually takes much longer for me to tell you about it than it takes to actually do it. And this is dynamic structure, meaning that as new issues, releases, features, goals, whatever, are created, they are pulled into the structure if they meet the criteria, and that's very powerful. It's our program managers live and die by this. So let's digress for a couple of minutes and look at a couple of other things here. The other generators, the rest of the toolbar, and some transformations and stuff. That's the technical term stuff. So the other generators, well, we've talked about insert and extend already. There's also a filter generator, which allows you to add JQL filters or SJQL, structured JQL. Talk more about that in a second. You can dedupe. So sometimes if a particular issue gets pulled in by more than one generator, it'll show up twice in the structure. This allows you to clean that up. And also you can filter on sprints or text or hard code sprints or whatever. So that's handy. You can also sort. We generally sort by rank, but you can choose your own criteria. Group, we generally group by feature list. So we have an A list and a B list for a release, and so we like to group our features that way. Let's talk about structured JQL for a second. It's another very powerful feature of structure. It lets you incorporate structure attributes into a JQL filter so that you can use those attributes outside the structure view in concert with other applications like time and status or work logs or whatever. So for example, show me the in-progress epics in this structure and their descendants. So in your JQL, you insert issue in structure, example structure, issue or ancestor in type equals epic, and status equals in progress. So that's super handy. And now I'll give you an example of using SJQL within a structure. So suppose you're building a structure for fixed version V1 of a project, but some of the features span releases. Some child goals are fixed version V1, some are fixed version V2. So here's an incantation in SJQL that you can input, and we'll let you see that. Here you can see on the right You'll see some of these goals are V1 and some are V2. And we're going to filter by, and we'll choose SJQL. Here's we've pasted my big long query into the little tiny box there. Now here's another tick box. This is a tick box. This is one that I would urge you to exercise caution with this particular tick box, because if you tick this box, it's going to pull in a lot of things that don't meet the criteria because the parents meet the criteria, and that may not be what you're expecting. So just be careful with this one. And you can also choose which levels you want to filter on, and that helps you control that. Anyhow, but we're going to go with leaving that box unticked and applying the filter to all levels. And moving along, you'll see that the filter is in place now. You can see it on the second line of the brown text under example structure at the top. And you can see that all the V2 goals are now hidden. They're not in the structure anymore. So again, pretty powerful. Just to give you kind of a tour of the rest of the toolbar, at the top left, you'll see add, create issues. That's a good way to create new issues in the structure. We've already talked about expand and collapse. The next two buttons moving to the right are the move up and down buttons, so you can move an issue within the structure up or down. You can also outdent he says, or indent. You can edit an issue, you can cut, copy, or paste issues. You can select more than one. You can select one or more and copy, cut, or paste them. And you can delete issues. That's the X. We've already talked about the automation button and all the fun we can have with that. And over on the right side of the toolbar is the button to share a perspective. So that creates a link that you can send to someone if you want them to see the structure as you're seeing it right now, with the columns and filters and whatever you have on. So you can send someone a link to the structure itself, but this is a specific link to what you're looking at a given time. You can also export the structure information to Excel, which is super handy. The one wrinkle there is that the time is exported in days. So for example, if you're looking at original estimates or remaining estimates or time spent, you can see that in the exported Excel, but it's time exported in days, but it's in hours, minutes format. So not quite as straightforward as it could be for calculations, but fairly simple to fix. The next button over the next buttons over are the layout buttons. Single grid, double grid, grid plus details, and grid plus history. We've looked at everything in single grid so far. The double grid looks like this. You can see the structure on the left, and then you can look at whatever you want to look at. You can enter some JQL there. You can choose what you want to. You can choose different kinds of filters for that. And you can see some tickets that aren't in the structure, and you could decide to drag them into the structure if you want to. So again, that's pretty handy. This is the grid plus details view, which allows you to see the details of a particular ticket. And it saves you going in and saves you having to open it in a new tab or something. So that's cool. The last one is grid plus history, which is handy if you're trying to track down some kind of problem. Which fortunately I don't have too many problems like that, so I don't spend too much time in here. But it's good to know it's there if you need it. So let's move over to talk about transformations for a minute. So the transformations and stuff menu is under the main toolbar, and the components of that piece are the pin button, the add transformations button, the quick transformations button, and the search and filter button, and the views panel. So pin lets you zoom in and really zero in on a specific area of the structure. So I've selected test epic 47 here by clicking on the dot, on the black dot there. And if I then click on the pin button, you'll see the rest of the structure disappears. The issues above it are grayed out, and the issues below it are hidden. So this is great, because sometimes if you have many, if you're looking at many stories under a collection of under a specific goal, for example, it can scroll off the end of the page, and it can be hard to tell where that goal ends and another goal begins. So this way you can just zoom in on exactly what you want to focus on at a given time. The next thing is, if you click on the Add Transformations button at the top right, this will open the Transformations dialog, and you can choose Add Transformation. You can choose a filter, a sort, a group, or an extend. So these look very familiar, because that's pretty much what we see under automation. But these are temporary transformations that allow you to extend or filter the structure temporarily. It's not the same as adding pieces as extending the structure sort of permanently. The one that I use most often is the filter transformation. So let's walk through that. I'm going to choose a JQL query for my filter. So it opens up a little command line for you. Super simple filter, type equals spike. So as you can see, it's grayed out everything that's not a spike issue type. Now I can save that. We'll save that as the spikes quick transformation. And that puts a button on this quick transformations toolbar. So when you click on the funnel button in the transformations toolbar, it turns on this bar of quick transformations, and you can click them to toggle them on or off. As you can see, we've got a couple up there already for goals and epics. There are a few default ones like assigned to me, by assignee, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so there's our spikes quick transformation that we can toggle on and off. Now we're over to the, oh, I wanted to talk about this. Yes, under the views, if you click on this, if you click on the plus over here, at the top right there's a small plus sign, and that's where you can control columns, and that's important. The first thing you want to do is toggle on horizontal scrolling. That makes column widths a lot easier to manage. It makes it a lot like Excel for that. This is where you can add columns to your view if you want to. You can also click on the little twisty in each column if you mouse over it, like I've done for status here, and it'll show you a couple of attributes of the column. And this is where you would go to remove a column if you wanted to do that. And depending on the column, some of them, like sum of remaining estimates and stuff like that, they have more attributes that you can customize. So when you add or subtract the columns to get the columns looking the way you want, then you can go to the view dialog. Here's an example view. The asterisk shows you that it's been changed, and you can save it as a new version of the example view, or you could save it as something else, call it something else, example view V2 or whatever. Or you could pick one of the other views that people are using, and you can revert, you can share it, make public, whatever. So there's a lot you can do there. And that's structure in 5 easy lessons. We've set up Jira, we've created our structure, we've inserted root issues, we've extended the structure, and we've transformed the structure. And that's pretty much how we do it. That's how we get the visibility into our workload. That's how you get the flexibility to zoom in and out, get the context for the details, get to drill down from a high level, and see the forest for the trees. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kel. We greatly appreciate your expertise in showing us how you use structure, and I hope that benefited many of you. We have a number of questions that I'm going to get to in just a moment, and we'll invite Miles in to help us with those questions as well. But before we do that, I'd like to run a quick poll for the audience. It's just a 30-second poll, just 2 questions. I'd like the audience, if you would, just share a little background, if you would, on these 2 questions. We'll give you 30 seconds to answer the poll, and then we'll close off the poll and go on with the Q&A. And while we're waiting, if you've got some questions for Kel or for Miles or for me, feel free to add those. All right, so it looks like we've got a fair number of folks from the audience have answered the poll. The questions were, if you had to pick between the 2, which would you categorize yourself in? It looks like we have 62% of you consider yourself to be in product development or R&D, about 38% of you in IT. And then which Jira platforms do you use today? 43% of you are using Jira Cloud. That's I think the first time we've run this poll, and we've seen the majority of the audience using Jira Cloud. 19% server, 19% data center, and some of you aren't sure, which actually isn't unusual. At the end of the day, many end users of Jira don't really care what platform they're on. It's not important to them. So that's not an unusual answer. So thanks for that feedback. Let's move on to the Q&A. So Kelly, we have a number of questions lined up. Miles, I think there's a couple of questions here for you. The first one is from anonymous Kel, and it's said with a smiley face. Is Twisty the official name for those icons beside the containers for child issues?
Twisties was a name that was used a long time ago, probably before most of you were born. And so that's what I still call them, because I don't know what they're really called. But anyway, you know what I mean, though, right? The little triangle thing there, that thing.
Yeah, it was said with a smiley face. I'm sure they knew what you meant, but they probably the first time they've heard that term. Second question, I'm going to deflect this to you, Miles, and ask you to unmute yourself and answer this question. Is there a way to prevent somebody in Jira from making an issue the child of 2 different parents?
I'm not sure that I'm the right person for this. I think this is this a structure? Was the question related to structure from a structure itself?
No, I think it's more of a Jira question, whether or not it's possible to stop someone from making an issue the child of 2 different parents.
Right. Well, there's yeah. I mean, well, I can take a bit of a crack at that. I mean, and I'm not actually a Jira certified administrator, so but I would have said that in Jira there's a very limited hierarchy, which is why structure is so successful. That hierarchy is, you know, at most epic, story, or another issue type underneath the epic, and then subtask underneath that issue. As I understand it, you actually can't have the same issue replicated across those parents. Isn't that right, Kelly?
I have to think about that.
You end up with a subtask because a subtask is a subtask, right? And it's just part of the parent.
Yeah, subtasks are clearly only have one parent. And an epic link, you can only link a story to one epic, as far as I know. When you're using issue links, as we're using for the higher levels of the structure, there's nothing intrinsic that prevents you from adding 2 belongs to links. And we see this, we see users doing this sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
the 2 approaches we have for dealing with that are, one is we can run a filter periodically to go, has anybody got 2 belongs to links? And if any of those tickets have 2 belongs to links, then we can go and figure out, well, where does this really belong? The other approach would be to, I guess we could look at doing something with Jira automation that would detect that, but I'd have to think about that some more. But for now, I would just go with the filter to detect tickets with multiple belongs to links.
I guess the other question is, why do you not want that? Because a lot of people will have different perspectives of a particular epic or a story. They may want to structure a hierarchy one way for one purpose, right, Cal? And then they might want to structure it for another purpose.
A fair point. I would say that depending on what you're doing, again, if we're rolling up estimates and time spent, then having the same ticket rolled up in two places is bad.
Right.
And if you want to look at if you want to look at the issues in two different ways, maybe the better way to do that is to create two different structures for the two different views that you want to have. And that way the person who's looking at it for the estimate roll up can see exactly what they need to see, but they don't have to have their view kind of corrupted by having someone else's tickets counted twice.
Right.
And I would like to add there is another use case for why you would want to have issues potentially have more than one parent. Sometimes there are features that span multiple releases. The development schedule spans multiple releases or multiple sprints. So there are cases where I think it's legitimate to have a custom issue type, custom link type that allows that, as Miles pointed out and as Kelly pointed out, in the Jira issue hierarchy, that's not possible. But with these custom issue links that you create, it is possible, and there's no way that I know of to actually prevent that from happening. If people want to make something a child of multiple parents, it's possible to do that. Next question. Let's move on. Kelly, you shared you use the share perspective feature of structure to share your view of the screen. And the questioner is asking, does that also share the view, the structure view, in that perspective link, or is it just the board that you're sharing, the view of the board?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I get the distinction, but but I'm sure I don't know the answer to that one. Sorry. Maybe Dave, you have some better insight.
Yeah, we actually do share the view. So if you're in, let's say you have 3 views of your structure and you're in view 3, when you create that perspective link, the view that you're currently in is shared as part of that link. So that is a capability that you have there. Next question. Why this particular, Kel, this is for you. Why this particular hierarchy? Why did BlueCat choose this hierarchy versus SAFE, for example, the SAFE hierarchy?
Well, I would say that this is sort of how our product management and program management teams have evolved their thinking over time. So we're doing agile. We're scaling agile. We haven't adopted this scaled agile TM, but I think we're scaling agile. It's just the way our teams have evolved.
Miles, do you see organizations using structure in a SAFE environment?
Yes, well, they can, and it's fairly common. But I would echo what Kelly is saying, that what's nice about structure is that it allows you to scale in Jira in a way that suits your organization. Jira is a fantastic toolkit, and it comes in, innately with the ability to run Scrum, Kanban at a very tactical level. It's the scaling part which is the challenge. Organizations that are seeking competitive advantage, like BlueCat, they're not necessarily going to swallow a methodology like SAFe whole. They've been on the leading edge for quite a long time now, so they were probably thinking scaled agile long before SAFe became very popular. I mean, SAFe is a good template, but it's not the only way to go about it. So I think that the flexible hierarchical structure that structure offers is is really, allows you to build out your own form of scaling agile.
Thanks, Miles. Next question for you, Kel. You mentioned exporting to Excel, but why? Why does BlueCat export to Excel? What do you do with things once they're in Excel?
The reason we make use of that is so that we can get a kind of a time series view of how our estimates, our remaining estimates, and our time spent is tracking. We start out with an overall original estimate for a release, and this allows us to track over time how whether our original estimates have changed, which means have we added content or have we removed content from the release, and then how our remaining estimates are tracking over time, and comparing that with time spent, so we can see, are we on track to hit our end of release date, or how are we doing? This allows us to, tune content and in real time, and that's very important for us.
Okay, thanks. Next question. I'll direct this to both of you. Miles, you go first, and then Kelly, you can go second if you have a perspective. How does structure compare to portfolio? Or did you consider portfolio instead of structure when it gets to you, Kel? So Miles, why don't you go first? What's your perspective?
Well, portfolio is an interesting but complicated planning tool. It's easy for me to just toe the Atlassian line, which is, every product is great. But, we're not huge fans of portfolio. It's a solid tool, for instance, if you can agree on one hierarchical structure. The way that portfolio works is you literally have to create an issue type for each hierarchical level, and then those issue types would live in different projects and need to be managed under governance. The problem is that those issue types are then linked to their parents in that hierarchical structure. If you put an issue type, if you put a new structural level in between them, it breaks the entire structure, and then all of the child issues are lost. So that's a problem. And then the other problem is there is only one hierarchical structure. We went back to Atlassian many times and said, you really need to invest in flexible hierarchies so that an enterprise doesn't have to agree on only one hierarchy. Structure is completely different. I mean, structure is in essence the ability to have whatever structure you want hierarchically, and you don't have to have hierarchical levels as sort of issue types in the same way that you would in portfolio. Structure is a very simple user interface, as you can see. Planners like some simple but still very powerful, as Kelly has demonstrated to you today. But the user interface is very clean, it's very crisp, and so that makes it very attractive. By contrast, portfolio is complicated with lots of bells and whistles and buttons, and so I think some people who use it from a planning perspective just get confused and can't figure it out and kind of try it and then give up. I think that would be how I would summarize it. Hopefully that's not too harsh, but it's kind of how we see things. Kelly?
How about you, Kel? Do you have a perspective?
Well, from BlueCat's perspective, we looked at structure and portfolio very early on. It was early in portfolio's life, and at that time we found that structure was just more capable for us than portfolio, and we've looked at it again more recently, probably two years ago, and found that portfolio was certainly the capabilities had grown, but it seemed to us to be very prescriptive, and you kind of have to adopt the portfolio model as opposed to our experience with structure was that we could adapt structure to our process, and that made it the easy choice for us.
Great. Related question, I guess. This is from another attendee called Anonymous. We have both structure and big picture in our organization. In what ways is structure better? Kel, what do you have a perspective on that? Did you look at big picture as well?
Nope, that's not one that I have any experience with. I'll defer to you, Dave.
I know you do, Miles. Why don't you offer your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, both structure and big picture are very successful apps. You know, the marketplace is an enormous laboratory of innovation. I mean, so they're both big products. I mean, structure has, you know, over 8,500 instances, at least according to Atlassian. And structure has been around for a long time. I think they're sort of, as they currently stand, they're sort of different in a way. Big picture is more of a super planning tool with Gantt charts and so forth. Structure, or at least the basic version of structure, is a very intuitive, simple hierarchical tool that allows you to create simple hierarchies, both simple and complicated. But it's got a crisp, simple interface. It doesn't seek to do huge amounts of different functions. And as I mentioned to you before, that's very appealing. So it's quite possible to, you know, to have both structure and big picture, and it's very likely that you have a large base of users that have grown up with structure and are very familiar with it. So, you know, I think if you're looking for something that is lighter weight in terms of overall planning, I think structure is a really, you know, fantastic product, because you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure everything out. But it still has a lot of depth. And so, you know, that would be my thought. I mean, Dave, you're obviously, you know, going to be quite biased about your response, but I'm sure you have your own perspective on it. I'm kind of curious to see how you pitch yourself.
Yeah, I think I'll not pitch in this case and just give you sort of the honest truth. I meet with a lot of customers, or I used to meet with a lot of customers in person. These days it tends to be on meetings like this, not surprisingly. And I think they're both really good products, and they're different in different ways. So what I hear most often from customers is that they like big picture if they're coming from a Microsoft project background, and they're looking for lots of, I mean, you mentioned this relative to portfolio as well, but lots of bells and whistles, lots of different things. The complaint I hear about all those capabilities is that it's, as you just said, Miles, it's very hard to use, or it can be very hard to use. But if you do things via the big picture recipe, if you will, they have kind of a prescriptive way of doing things. And if you follow that prescriptive way of doing things, you can be very successful with that product. Conversely, structure is a blank canvas. I loved when Kelly first created his structure today, and you basically had a big white screen. It's literally just a blank canvas until you decide what you want to do with it. And you can do almost anything. The flip side of that coin is that sometimes people get lost. They get twisted up, and they can't quite figure out how to use structure. But once they do, they like that simplicity, and they like the fact that they can do really anything with it. And it's not a prescriptive model at all. So that's the big difference that I hear most often. Some people like the prescriptive nature of big picture, and they like all those bells and whistles. Other people are looking for that simplicity and flexibility. Next question. First of all, there was a big thank you, Kel. It was from a relatively new structure user who said, this was an awesome tutorial, and I can't wait to share it with my colleagues. The same person asked, and I can answer this one, are transformations available in the cloud version of structure? And the answer is not yet. For those of you that aren't aware, Jira cloud is very different than the Jira that's on server and data center. And that means the APIs are different and the way we have to engineer our products is different. There's a lot of advantages to the way Atlassian has built Jira, but it's not a simple thing to take an application that was originally built for server and data center and just port it to cloud. So we're feverishly working on making all of the capabilities that you see in this data center and server versions of Structure available on cloud, and there's a roadmap published on our website. And Gene, I'll follow up with you offline to make sure you have access to that. Kel, would you go ahead and advance to the next slide just to put that information up while we're answering the rest of the questions? We have a few more to go here.
Come on. There you
go
go.
ahead right to that last slide. Just FYI, everyone, I'll talk about this in a second, but you might want to write some of these things down. So I have a follow-up question for you, Kel, on the Excel question. Why are you exporting to Excel? Why not just use the built-in reports in Jira?
I would say that the built-in reports in Jira don't give us enough in terms of the aggregation to make it we just found that it hasn't worked for us. We were not able to construct a structure-based burn down chart in Jira.
All right. Next question is, I think both of you may have a perspective on this one. Is it possible to sum up story points or other datas in the structure hierarchy? Can you sum the child status up to the parent?
Yep, that works. We use that a lot. We're not using story points, but we use original and remaining estimates, and yeah, that sums up to the parents very naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing that's important to note is that, you know, agile in a Jira project really does rely heavily on versions and releases, because if I have a large backlog that may be story pointed or not, an agile team will have a certain velocity. You know, you really don't know what that means unless you have some burn down that's relevant. And typically the burn down is best done probably at a version. So the version or the release burn down. Where things get tricky though is that if you've got multiple projects and you have different teams working on things, and you have more of a sort of say a PI planning approach, or you want to know where you stand vis-a-vis an epic that spans multiple groups doing work, you want to be able to sum up story points and things like that across different models, and that's again why you might want to look at a structure type product, because the basic Jira functionalities won't do it for you.
I think this might be a good spot to mention the progress bars in Structure. You can customize the progress bars in Structure to show, you know, basically you can choose the attribute. So it can be the count of tickets underneath, or you can choose estimates or story points or whatever. So that's another pretty neat feature.
I'll answer one of the questions someone just asked too. The answer is yes. Kel was using the server version of Structure in his presentation today. So their company, BlueCat, is a server user, so they're not using Structure Cloud at this time. Last question. I think we have time for this last question. And by the way, everyone, if you've asked a question and we didn't get to it live today, don't worry. We'll follow up with you via email and make sure your question gets answered by us or by one of the panelists. The next question is related to a relatively new feature in Structure called effectors. And the person is asking, Kel, if you've used effectors in your instance of Structure.
Not yet. Dave, what's a defector?
An effect. So actually, it's a great follow-on to the previous question. And in Structure, it's possible to do a number of things that before effectors only existed in structure. So sum up to the parent level is an example of that. Generally speaking, everything you see in a structure is in a Jira ticket. But there are certain calculations that you can do in structure, like summing up story points or time spent to the parent level. And historically, that result only existed in structure. And the new effectors feature allows you to write the result of a structure calculation to a Jira field. So you could specify which Jira field you want that effector to write the data to. It could be a custom Jira field that you create for that purpose, or it could be one of the other existing Jira fields. So for example, you could take the sum up of story points for a story or for an epic, and write that to the total story points for that epic in Jira, if you choose.
Cool.
So that's what an effector is.
Does that work in cloud now?
That does not work in cloud yet. Yeah, no, that's just a server issue.
Thanks.
All right, one last question. I said that was going to be the last one, but I think this person was anxious to get this one answered. We've used structure in Scrum meetings as opposed to the standard Jira views, to much applause. The ability to edit fields. Actually, this isn't a question. It's an endorsement of structure. I love it. I thought there was a question mark at the end. The ability to edit fields inline and see the updates happening in real time is a big winner. So thank you very much for that. And more thank yous, Kel, for your presentation today. Lots of folks are appreciating what we've done here today. So just to wrap things up for today, there will be, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there will be a webinar link. There will be a YouTube version of this, a recording of this available very soon, either by the end of the week or early next week. If you want to learn more about structure, you can go to this short link, alm.works/structure. If you want to learn more about blended perspectives, there's their URL, blendedperspectives.com. As I mentioned, they're a platinum Atlassian solution partner. They've been doing this for a long time, and they cover all of North America. And if you have any other questions at all, you can just send an email to webinars@almworks.com. Any questions at all about this webinar? If you think of a question you didn't get a chance to ask today, or that we didn't answer, you can send us an email. If you did send us a question and we didn't answer you, as I mentioned, we'll follow up with you by email anyway. But if you think of something else, or you have any other questions at all about today's session, feel free to drop us a note. And with that, I'll thank all of you for taking an hour out of your day today to spend with us. We really appreciate it, and we hope you get something worthwhile out of it. Thanks to my panelists. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you again next month.